I'm going to do some more work today with guilt and shame. Guilt and shame are distortions of a primal survival instinct, which is very strong in the animal kingdom, which is part of the self-preservation instinct around being part of a community, part of a herd, part of a group, part of a tribe. And they are aspects of feeling associated with the human conscience. I've spoken before about how within the animal kingdom certain survival functions, certain instinctive functions work really, really well. But they start to almost malfunction in the human kingdom. And the example is the engramic survival response in the animal kingdom, which is all about when an animal experiences a really dangerous circumstance, dangerous occurrence in its life, but it survives. It takes a snapshot of the moments leading up to that really dangerous situation. It takes a snapshot of the smells, what it heard, what it was seeing, what it was feeling, what it was sensing, sort of psychically, and takes like a perceptic snapshot, a snapshot of all the perceptions that it experienced in the lead up to that. And it's a survival thing. So then, if normally 3 or more of those perceptics occur in the same way, the animal then automatically runs away or does something that it has learnt to do to avoid the danger. And that works really well for the survival of animals, and to some degree that group knowing within the animal kingdom, within a particular tribe or a particular herd, group of any kind, there's a sort of lateral transfer which occurs, which means that if a bunch of animals in the same tribe or herd all end up with that same engramic cluster, the same smell associated with it raining, with it being just on dusk, that smell, that what it was feeling, the time of the year, so on, associated with similar danger, there's a 100th monkey sort of thing there, where if enough of the animals have the same engramic cluster associating the same set of perceptics to a perceived danger, it spreads through the whole herd. So they all know that then. Now this function works tremendously well until you start putting things in the engramic cluster like thoughts. Imagine, an imagined perceptions, ideas. Remember the subconscious as it exists for human beings. The subconscious mind cannot tell the difference between something that really happens or something that you see on TV or in a movie. It's all just perceptions. So The subconscious mind doesn't know that you're watching a movie or playing a video game. Or if something's really happening, it doesn't know the difference. As far as it's concerned, it's all happened to you. And that's really, 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 really dangerous. That's why, as I say to you, if you're going to go and watch a movie, you sit down before you go and you tell yourself, now, we're just watching a movie. This is just moving pictures. This is not real. And it goes, oh. Okay, so, but if you don't tell yourself, all of that stuff just goes in as though it's actually happened to you. So a lot of stuff that you're clearing as far as fears and phobias and all that sort of stuff may just be content that you've just absorbed through countless hours of watching TV and sitting in front of the computer, and so it may not even be real. This coming generation is going to, with video games and so on, is likely to have so much false engrammic content by the time they're 20 years old that they could run Cosmosis for a lifetime and not even get to the real stuff. They're just clearing the imagined stuff where they put themselves in cyberspace as though it's actually happening. It's dangerous for the human race. It's really dangerous because of the subconscious level. What's perceived to be happening to us collectively as a race on the subconscious level in the collective psyche to some degree sets parameters about what happens in the future of the evolution of the human race. So there's all these factors in what the psychological makeup of the human race is preparing for in the future. A huge component of that is now media, is now movies, is now video games. But the thing is that movies and video games don't really portray the world as it really is, because the news, if you believe the news, what you see on the news, you would believe that everyone's out to get everyone else and the world is a horrible place and only bad things happen. All these awful things happen. And that's of course not true. You see on the news a snapshot of all these sensationalised, random events put together, and it makes it appear that the world is this horrible, very, very dangerous place. And for the most part, of course, that is not true. But in our perception, it's heavily weighted to believe that that is the case. This is why we have so much, that engrammic process where if enough people start to have the same belief and engrammic clusters of perceptics around perceived dangers in the world, it spreads out into the collective psyche, and that's happening at primal soul level on this planet. So this is why we've seen such a rise in depression and anxiety disorders and other psychological disorders. Because on the collective level, the perception is that, almost we're universally in a world at war. And of course that's not the case. That's just not the case. But this is what the collective subconscious is preparing for. It's ready for. So therein we have a big problem. Part of what you need to do to ensure that you're not wasting a lot of time clearing a lot of stuff which is purely vain illusionary imaginings in the collective psyche is to remove yourself from an aspect of the collective consciousness which we call the audible life stream in alchemical terms, and to become plugged into this higher aspect of the collective psyche, which is the collective consciousness of the elder brothers and sisters of the human race, those that are not caught up in the day-to-day thraldom and glamour and maya and illusion, but are operating out of much higher ideals and collectively providing a mirror to the universal consciousness on this planet. Now this is a huge step in the development of any spiritual initiate. In order to be able to do that, you must not prioritize or take pleasure in any of these lower glamours and illusions which are so prevalent in the enjoyment that is, and the pleasure seeking which is experienced by most people that are here. So the problem with these engrammic clusters is that it works really well when you take a snapshot which has a smell and what you saw and the time of the day and how the hairs on your legs feel, you know, when the danger comes and all of these things. It only takes about 3 of those things together to trigger the response in order to get away from the danger. Now you start adding particular thoughts and your orientations in your consciousness to that, your opinions and your judgments to an engrammic cluster. You have the situation where you can smell something while you're having a particular thought, while you're seeing the colour blue, and you have a completely irrational fear-based response to a non-existent perceived danger. So this mechanism was never meant to have opinions, judgments, thoughts plugged into it. It's a legacy from the animal kingdom, and it doesn't work very well when you start adding all of these judgments into there. So it's important that you learn how to not operate in that way. To not operate in that way, you must be fully and completely present in each and every moment. You must never be unconscious. If you're not present, I'm fully present here with you. But as soon as I go, yeah, off in my imagination or withdrawing in order to avoid confrontation, perceived confrontation outside of myself or whatever, then my subconscious and my unconscious will take over running the ship. You go onto autopilot. If you're not there to do it, then the body's mechanisms will just take over, and it does its best to try to keep you safe, to survive until you come back. Now, we have the situation where if you are lamenting the past or just wishing yourself into the future, not sort of holding that point of tension of being fully present in the moment, you find yourself that if you're the sort of person who's constantly swinging between future and past, you're never actually in the driver's seat. Even if you think you are, you're never actually in the driver's seat. So all you're only ever going to get in your life is a rehash of what's happened in the past. Because it's the subconscious and the unconscious mind recreating future moments based on the perceived dangers. So you fall back to the survival instincts when that happens. So you're starting to run the survival instinct based best guesses of the way to proceed forward based on what it's perceived as dangers in the past. That's entirely fear-based, it's not love-based. So that's not the life of a spiritual initiate. So you must learn to be fully present in each and every moment. There's no excuse which is good enough to justify you not being in the present moment. So that is vitally important. So, and one of the CDs, I think I've talked about that engrammic perceptive process, don't I? Which one's that? It is there though, isn't it? Good. Okay, so I don't need to go too much more into that. It's good to understand that process. Sorry? Oh, one of the CDs. From one of the CDs. It's discussed in one of the CDs. But you get that process, the way that process works. Lil?
Question, because I thought that you only added an engrammic impression, like if you got triggered, like while you're watching a movie. But hearing you speak, it sounds like not necessarily you're not triggered, but you're just viewing it and...
Well, it's an unconscious response, right? So, if you're not, anytime you are not fully present in the moment, you are triggered. Because if you're not fully engaged, present with the moment, then the subconscious takes over to fill the void. So if you're not fully present, you are triggered. So then you can be, to some degree or another, accumulating these snapshot judgments of what's danger, what's not, which are then drawn on in the future. So that's true. That happens when you go unconscious. It happens when you're triggered, which is effectively the same thing. If you're not fully and completely in present time, then to some degree or another you're running hard on this engrammic perception process and accumulating those. Now, if the fight or flight response is triggered, though these engrammic clusters start to override you unless you really hold yourself in will. That's why a lot of people that are on the path, they're okay until they, until they sort of get triggered into some sort of a situation where they really feel threatened in some way, and they just don't seem to be able to marshal enough will to stop just acting out, panicking or whatever. One of the malfunctions of that, so you don't really see animals panicking. It's not something that animals do. They either run like hell or they play dead. A lot of predators, if something, because the consciousness of whatever the food that you consume has a big effect on you, and animals understand that. So the reason why a really smart animal will play dead if it's threatened by a predator is that because if the predator is very discerning and, careful about its diet, it doesn't want to consume the consciousness in that prey. If that particular animal is a big coward, it doesn't want to consume all that fear into its body. It knows what that tastes like and how it affects it and adds to its own fear, and it doesn't want that if it's trying to be top of the food chain in its little pond. It usually backfires because most predators are smart enough to go, you're faking, that makes you really smart, so I'm going to eat you because I want some of your smartness. But if you see predators in the wild, if the animal is just genuinely so, shit scared that it just can't move and it just, loses control of its body, most predators won't eat it. It doesn't want that in itself. Extended, extended to the human kingdom, you do have to be, some food just, it doesn't, it might work as far as chemical nourishment, but the other consciousness associated with it just is not happening for you, it's not healthy for you. And it's the same as sex, you've got to be careful who you have sex with. There's a huge transfer and melding of consciousness associated with having sex. So, you're going to come away with a certain amount of imprinting, a certain amount of sharing of understanding and consciousness and so on. You know, you would certainly want those hands to be loving you, really, really loving you for a start. But it goes way beyond that because there is that imprinting. You can have really ordinary sex and just feel great afterwards. You can have really great sex and feel bloody terrible afterwards. Anyone had either of those experiences? Why is that? You know, you might have this great physical sexual chemistry, which is the enthusiasm of the organs for each other. But, you know, no compatibility and no affinity on any other level. So the sex can be great, but what the exchange which happens on other levels can actually be quite damaging and detrimental to you on a whole lot of levels. You know, I've known women who have had sex with someone, like a casual encounter with someone, never experienced depression in their whole life, and then gone into chronic depression shortly afterwards. So open themselves so up to this person, and that the person that they've just had sex with has all, you know, all is really down on themselves and has all this, you know, chronic depression sort of stuff happening, and was just using the woman as kind of a dumping ground, like a fix, like a drug fix, and she, you know, ends up with this chronic depression afterwards. So, you know, it's a bit of a minefield. All you've got to do is make sure it's all about love. You know, it's you can do anything you want, and it'll be great provided it's all about love. If it's all about love, then only love can be the result, you know. But you do have to be careful with your connections. You don't want to be paranoid about it. Sex is a, you know, a wonderful form of human communication, but it's treated very, very, very casually in this day and age, and that's also not particularly good for the race either. So this experience, then we're moving on to understanding how this affects the conscience, because the conscience, the rudimentary conscience that the animal has, is largely based on this experience of these engramic clusters and what's in the best interests of the survival of the herd, of the tribe, of the group. Because for most animals, being part of a community of some kind, being accepted into a community and being valued as a useful member of a community rather than a burden is important to survival. It's really important to survival. And not just your own survival, but being in a position where you're able then to come together with a mate and to produce offspring, and the likelihood of that offspring being able to reach maturity and then continue to pass on the genetic lineage. The conscience, the rudimentary conscience, really starts to develop as a respect and a consideration for what's in the best interests of the group, of the community, in the animal kingdom. And then that really starts to break down in animals that are starting to reach the height of the development of the rudimentary mind. The highest form of mind that is really available to animals in the wild is cunning. Cunning can be in certain members of a group, of an animal tribe or of an animal herd, an animal community, can be extremely useful. But if too many members of that animal group start to be caught up in cunning, you start to have all sorts of problems, because there's a certain amount of competitiveness and selfishness, self-seeking behaviour. That's when cunning starts to come into things in the animal kingdom. That's when an animal loses that sort of nice innocence that a lot of animals have, and they start having a very different intention to what they actually are behaving. And then often you find that this is starting to occur with animals really at the top of the food chain, and you start to find that the community thing, the herd thing, the instinct starts to break down, and they start to lead more solitary lives, like the big cats and so on. And that's sort of when they're starting to be ready to move into the lower levels of the human kingdom and continue their evolution in the next kingdom. So we have this group sense, conscience of what is in the best interests of the group. And if it's in the best interests of the group, it's in the best interests of me, because I'm part of the group and my survival depends on the group, and it all gets tied up in there. Now when we move into the human kingdom, we have this conscience, morality, group morality thing happening. But we start to add imagination, self-image, self-awareness, which the animals don't really have, and things like guilt and shame. Guilt is feelings of, intense feelings of remorse associated with someone that you have done. And shame is that intense feeling that you are somehow fundamentally defective. That may be associated with things that you've done, or it may not be. It may just be an intrinsic feeling of less than, not good enough, so on. When you start to add this engramic mechanism of collective conscience, you start to add guilt and shame in there, and thou shalts. Then it's when you start to have the beginnings of a dogmatic collective morality. Thou shalts, absolutes. This is what leads to the concepts of heaven and hell, that there are certain things which are forgivable and certain things which are unforgivable, and then unenlightened individuals that are placed in positions of power, which means other people give their power away to them. They get caught up in this dogmatic assertion, this dogmatic mentality, and then they start to attempt to legislate to their understanding. And this is how the world's great dogmas in their many forms come into existence. Certainly something that really you need to evolve into a much more enlightened mode of operation if they're going to continue to serve humanity as we move forward. So, to some degree, you are tied up, limited, suppressed, repressed, as long as you are caught up in the collective sense of right and wrong, the collective sense of conscience, good or bad, what's good for the community, what's not good for the community. What's an example of a commonly held belief, that something that is not good for the human race, that is not good for the community, that is perhaps not good for the individual, which is, very, very, very commonly held, resonates very strongly in that collective conscience, but is obviously in error, given your understanding,
Refugees shouldn't come here, we should throw them out, they're not welcome.
Okay, that refugees are not welcome here, we should throw them out, we should keep them out at all costs. That's certainly, you know, a faulty belief. Just like the animal that has to be careful what it ingests energy-wise and the consciousness of its food, a nation to some degree needs to be discerning as to the people that it allows in. Many refugees are prepared to do anything to create a better life for their family, to risk all sorts of things, to not live in a way that they give any sort of support, even tacit support, to that which is unthinkable to them. And so they seek life in another country. Now, would those sort of people be good citizens to bring into a country that sort of had that sort of spirit? I would certainly believe so. But, you know, there's also a lot of refugees who moving around for a whole host of other reasons. So certainly you wouldn't just sort of throw your doors open to anyone that sort of wants to come in. But to certainly just, you know, across the board say we shouldn't be open to asylum seekers is a pretty unenlightened attitude. Something else?
It's good to go out on a Friday and Saturday night and get pissed each week because that's good social activity.
Yeah, the good social activity is going out on a Friday or Saturday night and getting blind drunk and sowing the seeds of Alzheimer's and all sorts of other things by consuming a class 1 carcinogen and calling it pleasure, by debilitating yourself. Yeah, well, it's a very commonly held belief, and not just in Australian society, but in many countries across the world. That the use of recreational drugs like alcohol and coffee is not only fun, but it's also clever to do that. It's clever to consume carcinogens, poisons, poison your system and call it pleasure. As you would become a little more enlightened, you would realise that's probably not very clever. But, you know, the collective conscience can bear down on you if you try to, you know, eliminate the use of these toxins like coffee and alcohol and so on. When you stop ingesting them, the community can frown on you, individuals can frown on you like you're an idiot. What's wrong with you? And that's actually coming out of this malfunctioning collective conscience. So being plugged into that, being controlled by that, is not going to help you in your spiritual process, in your life as a spiritual initiate. So it's really important that you are able to remove yourself from the influence of that. Now, the way that you remove yourself from the influence of that is by clearing out all guilt and shame that you personally carry, which is harmonically sympathetic to any of the major control mechanisms that are functioning in the collective conscience that you are plugged into. The collective conscience tries to, it magnetically like sucks you in. It really does suck you in. If you choose to not engage in the activity the attitudes, not contribute to the creation and maintenance of the thought forms which are associated with that collective conscience, it will do everything in its power to attempt to pull you in, to suck you in. But if you persist over a period of time in ignoring it, it ultimately, for a period of time, it'll decide that you're a threat and it will try to push you away. When the collective conscience, which is malfunctioning because of all this glamour and illusion and nonsense out there, starts to push you away, then you start processing like mad, eliminating, using Cosmosis to eliminate anything that you feel within you that collective conscience is pushing against in you, right? So the way the process works is that it's almost like you alchemically declare your intention to remove yourself from that aspect of the collective consciousness. I'm bored. It's not out of fear, it's just like, I don't want to play anymore. You know, I'm taking my ball and I'm going home. Okay, so you do that very, very, very clearly, and then you set your intention to be free and liberated from the effect of that collective. So you set your intention that you are going to move away from contributing to this. Now in yourself, that's going to bring up all sorts of survival stuff and, you know, if I don't be part of the, you know, I won't have any friends, you know, and all sorts of stuff could come up. You have to just ignore that and know that this is for the highest good of all concerned. You set your intention to be liberated from playing the games which are necessary to be part of the herd, to be accepted in part of the herd, and that you are going to join the ranks of the elder brothers and sisters of the race. Conversation's much more stimulating. And then you're going to start to feel this collective aspect of the collective consciousness trying to entice you to stay, to encourage you to stay. And it's very seductive and it's very manipulative. So any thing that you feel within yourself which is like, oh, I might, you know, I might, well, maybe it's, you know, yeah, I might stay. You've got to work on with Cosmosis to process all that out, right? That'll take a period of time, weeks, months. When that stops happening, then you find that it's almost like the collective conscience is starting to threaten you with expulsion. It's like, you, how dare you, you need me, you need me. And that'll bring stuff up for you as well, right? You just ignore that. You'll feel this very clearly. You know, if you keep doing what you're doing, you're gonna, you know, you'll be cast out, you'll be expelled, you'll be banished from me. And as soon as you feel that, you go, good, okay, great. And it's like you push as well, because it's trying to push you away to try to scare you to coming back. It will do that, it's primal, that's what it will do. As soon as you start to feel that, you push as hard as you possibly can away and you break free. At the same time, affirming, Mother, Father, God, thy will, not my will, be done. Make me the instrument of thy peace. Show me how I can help. Give me something to do. I want to play a role in the enlightenment process of evolution on this planet. So the process is relatively simple. We're going to be facilitating this process in the group mentoring process. It works better, of course, if you have a mentor. And your mentor will be facilitating this for you between now and the end of this year. Bearing in mind, the end of this year, we're seeing the end of a series of vast cycles on this planet. The start of a grand new cycle for the planet. So to be as free of all of these control mechanisms which prevent you from being spiritually sovereign puts you in really good stead as we move into this new cycle over the next 12 months or so. So within the context of your spiritual process, nothing really would be more important. When you'll be able to look back on it in hindsight, you'll be really glad. So to just have an understanding of that process is the beginning. Is the beginning. To have the willingness to extricate yourself, to remove yourself from the perceived safety and support that group conscience mechanism provides is the beginning. But the real work comes in dealing with your own guilt and shame that you carry with you, which you consider to be part of what defines you as you. It's something that you consider to be part of your unique identity. It shapes you, it defines you. It's like that comfortable old pair of jeans. It just feels like it fits you. And nothing new that you get just seems to fit you quite as well as that guilt and shame that you hang on to and wear so proudly. Something that you accumulate over lifetimes and you just keep imprinting onto yourself. Life after life after life. You may feel that it keeps you honest, that it keeps you holy, that it keeps you humble, that it keeps you out of trouble, that it keeps unnecessary or unwanted attention being drawn to you. It doesn't matter why it's there, but you will all have this guilt and shame that you carry within you, which you believe is part of what makes you you. And it is unnecessary. So as we call forth the violet flame and we call forth from the universal spirits of spiritness a downpouring of universal self-esteem, universal self-determination, and universal belonging, universal worthiness. And we allow that to fill ourselves. And anywhere we feel resistance, anywhere that doesn't feel like it's moving freely, that's where we have our concept of uniqueness tied up with guilt and shame. And set a conscious intention that you are declaring that you are removing yourself from the control of the malfunctioning collective conscience of humanity. And you choose to be standing as a concentrated point of living light, spiritually sovereign, in, of and for love, in service to all that is. Make a commitment to yourself that you're going to deal with the resistance which seeks to keep you trapped within limitation and suppression and repression of your sovereignty. Work with the violet flame to identify this resistance and where these energetic connections into the collective malfunctioning human conscience, which actually encourages you to engage in self-destructing behaviour, self-destructing thoughts and beliefs, which cause you to not be liberated. You instead choose liberation, individual sovereignty. And you instruct the violet flame as you work with the violet flame each day to show you what you need to transmute this day, so that you give when this collective malfunctioning human conscience tries to feed on you, you give it a bad taste in its mouth. Because you want to give it such a bad taste in its mouth that it wants to spit you out. And as soon as it wants to spit you out, even if it's only threatening to spit you out, you jump. And you will be embraced by those who stand individually sovereign, free and clear of that controlling mechanism. Now, there's nothing wrong with that controlling mechanism. It is as it is, and to a large degree it is a construct which has been created by the collective will of human beings, by not wanting to own their own power, by wanting to give their power away and not know the truth, to engage in superstition rather than truly understand. And that's fine for them, but that's not your choice, because you want to stand in your own light as a spiritual initiate, just like they did in the old days. Regardless of all the glamours and the traps and the intoxications and the seductive potentialities here for short-term temporal pleasure at the expense of your eternal well-being. You choose your eternal well-being. So all you really have to do is not buy in to this collective consciousness in a way that you give that collective consciousness a bad taste in its mouth, so it wants to spit you out. You know that feeling you have when you eat something and you really just want to spit it out? You might be too polite, but you just really want to spit it out. You want to give that collective consciousness that feeling. That's what you're alchemically precipitating. So it's a mutual thing. You don't want to be a part of it, and it doesn't want to be feeding off you. Because that's what it's doing. It's feeding off you. And if you're letting things feed off you parasitically like that, It's very, very hard to stand in your own light and be spiritually sovereign with parasites. So you want to get it to spit you out. And that's what we're setting in motion, and that's what we're going to be working on over the next few months. Would anyone like to paraphrase what I've shared with you? Or shall I choose a volunteer?
So
Yeah, mate?
We're making ourselves unpalatable to the planetary collective, and so that
Well, just an aspect of the planetary collective. Making yourself unpalatable to an aspect of the planetary collective, yep.
yeah, so that you know, it doesn't want to consume us, and it wants to, you know, spit us out, and we want to, you know, say thank you and go with it. You know, we're going with. We want to be spat out as well too. Yeah, thanks. Let's go.
You know, all of the great masters, all of the great saints and sages that have been truly remembered as great spiritual initiates, and you may have your own favourites, every one of them has caused themselves to be spat out of the collective conscience of humanity. Because if you run that race as part of that, there's no way you will achieve anything other than spiritual mediocrity. If you are going to be tempered, Ambrose said temperance is wise restraint of thought, word and action. It's a big part of wisdom in action. If you're going to be tempered by what the collective conscience of humanity is telling you, and you're going to be factoring that in as a big part of you making your decisions, there's no way you are going to make the sort of decisions which are going to lead to extraordinary, great spiritual success. There's no way. So all of these great saints and sages and masters, they've all done this. They've all done this. So you are in good company. You are in truly good company. And as you extricate yourself from this, you find yourself in the company of all the others who have also done this, who form their own collective consciousness. And you come in to this group collective consciousness which has its own conscience, but it's operating with a completely different set of principles. Highest good of all concerned, the most light, the most love, the most compassion. We need more of this. So then the collective that you're plugged into is constantly, yay! Go for it, more love, more light, yeah! You're not filling yourself with poison. Yeah, that makes you really smart. Well done. What a good dog. And that's a whole different experience. It's a whole different experience for most of you, trying to do what is intelligent in spiritual terms as far as your eternal well-being is concerned evokes a response from the collective consciousness and those around you that, you know, like you're some sort of pariah or some sort of idiot, you know, the class, you're the local joke, you know. You don't want to be part of a collective that treats you like that for making wise choices. So if you really want success, you want to be hobnobbing with a different class of human being on the planet. And there are far more of them than you would perhaps realise. So a lot of the work that you've been doing is preparing you to be ready to have the confront and the willingness to effect this transition. And you'll be amazed how things will change. You'll find once you effect this transition that 70% of that oppressive energy that you experience, which is trying to stop you moving forward on this path of individual spiritual sovereignty, is gone, because it was coming from that collective conscience of humanity, which is malfunctioning. It's the same collective consciousness that tells you that it's smart to get blind drunk and fill yourself with poison and call it pleasure. You know, would you really take advice from a collective memory composite that is giving you that sort of advice? Telling you it's not smart to be doing what you're doing and pursuing your own ascension-descension process. It's not smart to do that. But it is smart to get really drunk and poison yourself and call it pleasure. You wouldn't take... it just common sense now tells you, the common sense of, spiritual common sense tells you, that's not really smart. So you need to get removed from the influence of that. So Linda will be doing some more work on this tomorrow with you, from the aspect of the feelings associated with this. What we're doing this afternoon is orientating the will to understand why this is probably the smartest thing you'll ever do in your life, and you determining, using determination to align your will towards this outcome. To have an understanding of what you're going to do. You're going to be delving into your own guilt and shame that this collective faulty, malfunctioning conscience on the planet is using to manipulate you through that guilt and shame that you carry. You're going to be processing that out over the coming months, and you will go through this experience. You will feel as though it's trying to seduce you back in, to entice you, to keep you back in. Instead of giving you a hard time like it's been doing for a long time, it's going to change its tack, and it's going to try to make you feel like you belong and you're part of things, and play into your need for acceptance, but it's all fake. It's just, it doesn't want to lose you, because you're good food, you're good tucker. It's good sucking this energy from you. And you just persist in ignoring it and processing out whatever hooks you feel and whatever guilt and shame that is coming up, and then eventually it will threaten to expel you, and as soon as it threatens to expel you, you just push as hard as you can and propel yourself out. And then you have to be really clear in your universal consciousness. Mother, Father, God, whatever works for you. I choose to serve. I'm free, now I'm available. Suck me into place. Suck me into place, and you will feel a sense of belonging like you have never experienced ever. That you'll never have if you remain part of that low-level collective consciousness. You'll feel that sense of self-determination. You'll feel that sense of belonging and uniqueness and worthiness, and this feeling of acceptance like you have never experienced before. And joy will become so easy for you, you won't believe it. Okay, who's in? Most of you? Okay. Okay.
In the bag. You want to let go of and want to move towards.